Good. Nice. We're recording then. Hello, everyone. Hello to everyone watching this from the recording. Let's get right to it. Second remark before I actually open with my introductory story is to say that on the screen in front of yourselves you can see a Slido code. You can open Slido's website, slido.com, or open their app if you have it downloaded and enter this code into the text field that you'll see there. It's purely for asking questions. So if, for many reasons, people are not always comfortable with asking these, let's say, sometimes intimate financial questions in front of everyone with their name. That's why we use Slido, because if you submit questions through there, it will be fully anonymous. Your name won't be disclosed. So if there's anything you want to ask, it can either be related directly to the slide that will be presented, or it can be a more general question about your financial situation, about anything essentially you want an answer to. Then you can use Slido. I have my phone next to me, so I'll see it in real time, and I'll try to answer it either right away if it's something related to a slide that will be displayed, or I have a relatively long Q&A section reserved towards the end of the meeting, so we can discuss any questions you might have there. So if it's something more general, I'll be more likely to defer it until the end of the presentation, where we'll have the Q&A section. So I'll keep this slide on for some time because I have an introduction that I want to present to you. In the meantime, you can take a photo. You can use it to connect to Slido and to have questions there. Okay. Since that is all technical, let's get to the content of our presentation. Before I tell you who I am or what we will be essentially talking about today, let me start by a quick opening thought. I like to think about financial health or personal finance similarly to taking care of your physical health. You can find a lot of good parallels there. So, for example, in physical health, many people know that if you consume more calories than you are able to burn or somehow use up throughout the day, then you will be gaining weight over the long run. And if you do that over very, very long periods, then the weight can start being limiting. It can take away from your freedom, from your self-confidence. In worse situations, it can lead to health risks, such as some diseases or heart issues or similar things. So it's not good to sort of keep to this lifestyle over the long run. And it's very similar with financial health and with financial habits. For example, if you spend more than you are capable of earning or than you can earn, then you will accumulate debt. And that is similar to fat or to weight in the sense that it can be limiting and it can become pretty dangerous if you have a lot of it, right? You can get into personal bankruptcy. You can have your wealth taken away from you. It will be limiting. It will be taken away from your mental health and from your self-confidence. So financial habits are very similar to physical health habits, right? It's just like taking care of your health and of your body. However, there is one very important difference. And that is the fact that taking care of our financial health is absolutely not engraved in our culture to the extent taking care of your physical health is, right? When you want to lose weight, for example, it's relatively easy to find support because we admire people who start going to the gym. We admire people who start changing their diet. There is a lot of advice out there. It's much easier to seek help. Whereas when it comes to having conversations about our financial health, we are much more hesitant to have them because we are sort of embarrassed about our financial situation. We don't want the others to know how much we make or that we live paycheck to paycheck or that we don't have any savings because we're sort of embarrassed about that. And we think that's why we're often sort of afraid to have these conversations, afraid to ask for help. We keep it for ourselves. And that's sad because we're missing out on a lot of good tips, on a lot of good ideas exchange on how to manage our finance better. And sort of one of the goals of these presentations, of these webinars that I will be presenting to you, is to sort of teach people to be more open about these things, to give them tools, to ask for help, to exchange tips, and also to give them some guide step by step on what they can do if they want to put their financial situation in order. And that is essentially what we'll be doing here so that we're equally sort of bold about talking about financial health as we are about losing weight or about going to the gym and similar physical health related things. So that's to the broad purpose. Now, before I tell you anything more specific on what you should do and what you shouldn't do, let me tell you a couple of things about myself so that you understand where I take the audacity to teach you anything about these topics. My name is Šimon. I work in a company called Finax, which is a Slovak securities broker-dealer. I will explain our activities and briefly introduce our company. Okay, I don't know why I was muted. Sorry for that. I will explain more about our company in the next slide, but before that, about me. I've worked in Finax for the past almost 4 years, and there are a couple of areas that I handle. The main area of work tasks, let's say, that I handle is external communication. That is anything that is related to presenting our products, their functioning, and their philosophy to the public and to people who might want to use them. So it's anything from these educational webinars that we are doing to email communication, to blogs, to podcasts that we have, to webinars that we regularly organize, to anything that is related to communicating these ideas outside. So that's sort of directly related to what we will be doing here. The second sphere of things that I handle is product. So I sit in the investment committee, which is a body that has to approve any new investment portfolios that we create, and that sort of creates the portfolios, right? I do a lot of analytical and research work when it comes to creating our investment products, which means that I was able to gain a lot of insight into how these products are made and how they are created, what you need to keep in mind when constructing your own. And I will try to pass on some of that knowledge to you in these webinars, in these lectures, where we'll be also talking about investing. And then last area of what I do is handling corporate finance. So that is anything related to budget and financial results of our company. I construct reports that go to our shareholders so that they understand how we are. That's also, let's say, directly relevant to what we are doing here, because managing a personal budget or a family budget is somewhat similar to managing a company budget, is just on a smaller scale, right? So I'll try to pass on some of those tips as well. Before that, I studied abroad. I studied in Amsterdam. I also spent a semester at the University of Hong Kong, focusing on economics and finance. These spheres are not only my long-term area of studies, but also my big hobby. So I hope that will be apparent from that. Enough about me. I also wanted to spend some very brief time introducing our company. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but it's important because it explains how it's related to these webinars and educational activities. So as I mentioned, we are a Slovak securities broker-dealer called Finax. The main thing we offer are essentially investment portfolios. So whenever there is a normal person who has some financial goal, would like to appreciate the money, beat inflation, save up for an emergency fund, whatever, they can come to our website, fill in a simple questionnaire, and we will advise them on what investment strategy and what investment portfolio is good for them. We will then also automate their investments. They can set up a standing order and essentially have their investments managed by us. We have portfolios for various goals, from super short-term saving of a couple of months to a couple of years, to more long-term savings for goals such as retirement, pension, or saving for your kids, for their education, for their studies abroad, all the way to very specific retirement solutions, such as the European pension that is mentioned in the slide on the right side, which is something like a Europe-wide third pillar scheme, which is also transferable. So if you move from one EU country to another, you can take your third pillar pension savings with you. But the main benefits are also elsewhere. It's in the regulation that limits fees, costs, and seeks to enhance investment returns, investment profits for the clients. It is if you want to know more about this scheme, more about third pillars, it's part of one of the webinars related to this financial wellness that we present here. But the main thing that I wanted to mention about what we do is that from the beginning, or from the time when we were founded, which is more than 7 years ago now, we focused a lot on educational activities. It makes a lot of sense because we don't think that the work of an investment manager ends with creating an investment portfolio and throwing it out there and letting the public, teach themselves how to use it wisely. Because investment products, can sometimes be risky, and you can handle them wisely, but you can also handle them in a way that will end up burning you and losing you money, right? So it's important to know what to expect from them, what is the overall investment philosophy behind those products. It's important to teach people how to handle their money wisely so that they don't end up burning themselves. So from the beginning, we set up a lot of educational activities. We have blogs, we answer to the media often, we organize our own webinars, have a lot of podcast series in several languages where we try to answer people's questions and teach them sort of the overall investment philosophy. And one of the outcomes of these educational activities is also the program that you are participating in right now. This program is called Finax Financial Wellness. It's a series of lectures that we bring directly to the companies so that you can learn, to handle your money as a part of your work. It's composed of 5 topics now. We've expanded them based on the demands from people who were participating and giving us feedbacks on what else they would like to know. And so we ended up with 5 topics. The first of them is this one. So it's about healthy personal finance basics, some financial planning, and building up an emergency fund as your first sort of savings goal. Then we progress to the second topic, which is concretely about investing, right? So it's about all those things like stocks, bonds, how to compose a portfolio, how to save in long-term investments, right? The third topic is specifically about pension planning. So that's one of the most expensive and most long-term financial goals that you can have. And we're talking specifically about how the pension system works and what are various options for saving up some of your own money to support yourself at retirement. Then the fourth topic is about good and bad debt, with what debt is dangerous, what debt can help you in sort of reaching your financial goals, how to pick a mortgage and similar things. And then we also have a fifth topic, but that one is still being prepared. So you need to wait, let's say, a month until we manage to finalize it, but it's about finance for kids. So that's specifically about if you are a parent and if you want to not only teach your kids about finance, but also maybe save up for some financial goals related to your kids, such as their wedding or their studies, if they want to study at a more expensive place or something like that. How to do that, how to plan for that, how to communicate about these topics with kids. So those are the 5 topics we have. Today, we will be talking about the basic topics. So we will go over the basics, the very first step that you can take if you are a person that's sort of never had very extensive financial education. It's maybe something that was scaring you a bit or that felt like it was out of your control. What are the very first steps that you can take when you want to, gain control over your financial situation? So let's do that in several steps. The first thing I want to answer for you is to sort of pose a big why question, let's say, right? Some people might be asking, why should I even care about personal finance? Why is it something that is important and shouldn't just, can't just be more or less ignored over our lives? Because that's how many people feel. They just somehow can get away with not thinking about their money too much. I want to give you a couple of good reasons for why, taking care of your financial situation can lead to very good long-term benefits, right? The first of them is this simple picture. I love it because it sort of illustrates the main idea of what we do when we think about finance, right? So a very important thing to realize is that income very likely is temporary for most of us. I don't think anyone in this call wants to be working by the time they are 70 or 75. Our cognitive capacities, our energy levels, and also just, it's human decency not to work forever. We want to have some retirement. We want to have some time when we will be, just going for walks and reading books and spending time with our grandkids without working. But because you stop working at some time, you stop having that much of an income, right? And one of the goals of personal finance is to transfer some money, build some financial wealth, build some amount of money at the time when you are young and when you can work, so that you can use those savings to support yourself when you know when you are old and when you can't work anymore. Now, there might be a logical question to this. Isn't this the role of the state, right? Aren't there state pensions? Won't the state take care of us? But the sad answer is that that's highly unlikely, right? That high pensions or very decent retirement solely secured by the state is very unlikely. Why is it so? The problem with Europe, the problem with the pension system as it exists right now is that it was created in a different age. So the way our pension system works is that you have a bunch of people who are working and they are paying taxes or social security contributions. And this money is immediately raised and sort of immediately used to pay the pensions of people who are currently retired. You can think about it as a pipeline through which, money is flowing from those who are working to those who are currently retired. Now, this can work very well if you have a lot of young people who are working and not that many people who are old and retired. This was the age when these pension systems were being designed. You had very little people living by very old age, living until very old age, and you had a lot of young people, a lot of kids being born who could work, who could be taxed, and so that we raise money for pensions. The problem in Europe right now is that we're rapidly aging. That means that life expectancies are lengthening. More and more people are living until retirement and need to be taken care of. And not many kids are being born, right? So you don't have that many people coming to the labor market to replace those old people and to pay those taxes, right? So you have fewer and fewer people working who you can tax and sort of get money for pensions. And you have more and more pensions to pay. And that is unsustainable because it will mean that eventually you'll run out of money to finance those pensions, and you as a state can't borrow forever. Already in many Central European countries, including my home country of Slovakia, the pension system is already at a loss. Already the taxes are not enough. Imagine what will happen in 20 or 25 years when many of us will, or maybe some people in this call will already be retired and will need that income. What this means is that the states are unlikely, especially in the future, in 20 or 25 years, to be capable of providing a very decent pension. The amounts will probably be lower. Of course, this doesn't mean that pensions necessarily have to be cut, but the problem is that they might not be raised as much as inflation, as much as prices, or as much as salaries will be rising in economies, which means that they will, sort of replace lower and lower portion of your income. This is actually the number that you can see in front of you. It shows the expected change in the so-called replacement rates. Replacement rates are sort of a portion of your income that you can expect to earn when you are retired, right? So if you, for example, were used to earning, 1,000 euros after taxes before you retired, and you get 500 euros as your pension, you get a replacement rate of 50% because you get sort of half 50% of your previous income after you retire. And these replacement rates are expected to decline significantly in the next decades. For example, in this study that we found, you can see that most of replacement rates in 2070 are expected to be somewhere around 25 to 50%. That means that you can expect roughly half or 1/3 of your income, or 1/4 of your income that you were used to earning before retiring, after retirement. And that's a lot of expenses to cut, right? Like that's not a lot of money. You would have to find a way to eliminate absolute majority of your expenses. And that can be difficult. That is the reason why already many people who are retired have part-time jobs. And that doesn't sound very decent. So if you can manage to save something, to set something aside for retirement so that you don't have to work when you are old, maybe it will allow you to have sort of a more decent old age retirement, just like you imagine, right? So that's one of the very important reasons. Now, another reason is that in these regions, such as, let's say Central European countries, Slovakia, Poland, many other countries around, we don't have a strong tradition of somehow working with our wealth, working with our money, right? This is because, we're post-socialist countries. There's not a very strong tradition of investing or of like free market and entrepreneurship here, which is why even if we save some money, we hold most of it in the bank. And that's a problem because prices are rising. You probably heard about inflation in the last couple of years because it was really, really high. And so what happens when prices are rising is that your money can buy less and less things, right? Maybe for 100 euros, you would have bought much more groceries somewhere in Tesco 10 years ago than today, right? So each euro that you have in your wallet, that you have in your savings, can gradually buy you less and less stuff, less and less things that you need. And the problem with that is that, even if we manage to save up something, even if we manage to build up some savings, oftentimes it only gets held in the bank, which means, and since banks often for most savings accounts don't really pay very much interest, this money just loses value to inflation, right? There are methods such as investing, which are meant to sort of protect money from inflation, multiply your money so that it beats the rising prices. And that is also one of the things that are the reason to take care of your personal finance, right? So as you can learn things or learn how to protect your money from rising prices, from inflation, so that you don't lose every year some value of the money that you fought really hard to earn and that you fought really hard to save up, right? And then maybe, yeah, this is sort of a thing that illustrates it, right? The world of investing is relatively rich. And in our region, in Europe, we often limit ourselves to cash, so holding things in the bank, or maybe to some very conservative investments such as bonds, but we don't really explore options that might be suitable for other goals, where you can take more risk, and your reward would be beating inflation. We will be talking about this investing in the second webinar if we have it together. So that's exactly the topic of investing. Then the one last thing I would like to mention, as an answer or response to the question of why care about personal finance, is to eliminate stress and to have more freedom in your life, right? So I think everyone knows it. The feeling when the next paycheck is about to arrive and we don't really have any more money, and it's causing us a lot of stress because we are stressed about whether we will be able to take care of those people who we love, of our family, of our kids, right? It's sort of indecent, not very pleasant to live in a lot of financial stress. Finance and money is also one of the dominant reasons why relationships fall apart, why partners argue and have arguments. So, not having a lot of money, or not having money, not having money in order, can add stress to your life and sort of, decrease your overall enjoyment of things that you enjoy doing. And that's bad, right? It's good to, try to look for ways to put your financial situation in order so that you can feel less financial stress. But also, once you put it in order and manage to build up some savings, manage to build up some wealth, money gives you a lot of freedom to handle your time however you want, more freedom and autonomy over your own choices. So, for example, if you have a very big financial reserve, it's easier to, end a job that you've burnt out from because it's very, very stressful and requires a lot of hours, and spend a couple of months living on your saved up money and looking for a job offer that is better, sort of looking around. You might not be able to do this if you don't have savings, right? Where you're sort of more dependent on the job that you currently have and cannot afford some search time for a new one. But also, the more money you have, the more freedom there is. You can take unpaid vacations, you can travel more. It's easier to take care of your family or to start the family and have kids. Essentially, many choices that we might have depend on having some financial background, some financial foundation. And if you manage to build it up, you will have more freedom to sort of pursue these dreams and to, do what you want with your time, right? So that's also a very big reason why having money in order is important. Okay, I hope that was motivating enough, but I guess that can be getting a bit boring at this point. So now that we understand why this is important, let's also spend some time discussing what we should do first. So I'll try to give you maybe some very specific steps that are easy to take at first. So if you've never handled your financial situation, if you've never essentially done much about your money, then a very good first step is to conduct a financial analysis. This is to find out how your financial situation even is, right? Um, it's sort of like, when we talk about your physical health, like going to a regular doctor checkup, right? If you don't go there, you can't even learn what possibly can be wrong, right? And if you don't really examine your money, don't look at your financial situation, you can't really know whether there are some problems, whether there is something to improve, and how to do it. So before we can propose anything to improve, we have to look in the mirror. We have to look in the financial mirror and examine our situation. So there are four things that you can examine as a part of your financial situation. The first, this should be very easy, is to be aware of your income. So just sum up your household's total income, how much you earn. That can be your salary that comes into your bank account, and it can be also a variety of other things. It doesn't have to be job related, right? So if you get tax bonus from the state because you have kids, include that. If you have some scholarships or some other allowances, include that. If you have rental income because you have an investment property, you can include that, right? This is important to be aware of because your income is the ceiling of your expenses. If you spend more than you earn regularly, then you will accumulate debt in one form or another. And if you do that over a very long time, remember the weight gain parallel. It will get limiting. It will be hard on. It will become limiting and it will become dangerous, right? So you need to prevent doing that over very long periods. The second thing that you can become aware of is to become aware of your wealth, right? So what financial wealth or what sort of possessions you manage to build from your income, right? This is anything that you own. So it can be amounts in your bank account, savings account, some investments, maybe some pension pillar savings, maybe some savings in insurance schemes. You can also try to estimate the value of the house you live in or the furnishings or car or something like that, but don't spend too much time on it. It's important to, be aware of your wealth because this is ultimately what allows you to access the benefits that we were talking about, right? If you have a lot of wealth, so a lot of money in your investment account, for example, that is what gives you the freedom to handle your time how you want. And that is also what prevents financial stress because you are prepared for bad days, right? If in case something happens, you have some reserves built up. So increasing the value of your wealth over the long run will be the goal of what we'll be trying to teach you here in these webinars, right? So it's important to be aware of what your starting point here is. And for example, if you know that you earn relatively lot, but you don't have much savings, you don't have much wealth, then it can be sort of like a red flag to suggest that you might be overspending, right? So it might be one initial indicator to tell you that something is not okay with your financial habits. Then this is the most important part and probably also the most embarrassing for many people. You should be aware of how you spend your money, right? So this just means sum up your expenses on various things over the last, let's say, 3 or 4 months. You can categorize these expenses into categories. So for example, find out how much per month you usually spend on housing, on transport, on food, or let's say on groceries, on restaurants, and similar categories, right? You can either do it manually by opening up your bank app and summing it up in Excel, or you can use personal finance management apps that will automate this process for you. I will be talking about those very soon. This is often embarrassing for people. They don't like to do this because we are sort of sometimes ashamed of our spending, especially if we regret it or somewhat. I remember many nights out after which I didn't even want to look into my bank account. But hey, it's important to be aware of these things because if you don't know how you spend your money, then you can never find out whether you are actually spending it on things that are making you happy or on things that you don't really need in your life, right? And that you are capable of sort of changing or limiting if you pay more attention to them in the future, right? So unless you know how you spend, you cannot really know whether there is a potential way to improve, right? And that's the goal of this exercise, right? And then the last thing to be aware of is your debt. So just sum up the outstanding amounts, unpaid principals on your loans. So that is the remaining mortgage to be paid, some consumer loans, if you have some overdrafts or credit cards or anything like that, right? Over the long run, we will definitely try to prevent the value of your debt going up. So you're accumulating debt because that can't go on for forever. You have to avoid the habits that lead that. And we will more likely be trying to pay off your debt so that you don't owe money to the others. So it's also good to, let's say, once in a year, compute the value of your debt and to check whether over, in a horizon of a couple of years, it's getting gradually repaid, it's going down rather than going up. If it's going up, that's again a red flag to suggest that there might be problems. Okay, once you have this, we've looked into the past, maybe saw some potential problems. Now you might be asking, okay, what should we do going forward? And that's the second step you can take. Once you look into the past, which you can't change, you have to set up a plan going forward. And this plan is called a budget. So a budget is just a target amount that you want to spend in each of those categories that we mentioned. So a target amount on housing, on groceries, on restaurants, on going out and fun, on any other categories of expenses, transport, that you can think of, right? You will have a target amount and you will watch whether you don't, exceed this amount or go over it. It's sort of your limit on how much you want to spend on that category. Before I get to, how to save if your expenses are too high, let's sort of discuss what a healthy or optimal budget that is usually recommended by people who work in the personal finance field looks like, right? So your target, your long-term goal where you would like to get to is to have a proportion of expenses that looks something like this. So 50 to 60% of the budget, so 50 to 60% of your income will likely be taken by your needs, right? So needs are the necessities that you need to survive. That can be housing, that can be loan repayments, phone bills, basic groceries. I'm not talking about restaurants here. I'm talking about basic food that you cook at home, basic clothing. So again, not like very good fashion, but clothing that you need to sort of not freeze. So this would be needs, right? 30% of that budget roughly can be allocated to wants. So those are not things that we need to survive necessarily, but they make our life enjoyable and worth living. So it's very good to have them in the budget, right? That can be hobbies, that can be going out, cinemas, better fashion, right? Traveling, eating out in restaurants and similar things. So this is essentially everything that we want. But if there was a super bad crisis, we would be able to survive without that. And then 10 to 20% is good to allocate to savings and investment. So this is an amount that you can set aside regularly each month and either put it into your savings account at first or put it into your investment account. These will be things that will be funding your future. So that will be, we will split this amount among things such as retirement, such as the future of your kids, such as other financial goals in the future, maybe saving up for a down payment of on your mortgage if you're young and if you're planning to purchase your own housing, right? So these are the things that we'll allocate towards future, not towards things that we will be purchasing now. Now, what you're probably thinking of right now is, okay, this is all nice theory and nice numbers, but I can't get there, right? Because our expenses are too high and everything is too expensive and it's impossible for us to save. So how to save if we want to? That is essentially a topic of the next slides. So if you analyze your expenses and if you learn that essentially your expenses are too high to allow you to save 10 to 20% of your income and allocate the rest as shown in this slide, then we suggest the following order of trying to eliminate expenses or following order of saving. Come on. Yeah. So when trying to save, many times people are, hesitant or don't want to talk with financial advisors or anyone like that because they think that, it will be like a financial advisor in a nice suit telling them not to spend on anything that makes them happy because everything should be invested and everything should be greedily accumulated in your account, right? We don't think that's a good approach because if you just eliminate anything that you like from your life, you won't be able to keep these habits for a long run because you will be miserable. So we suggest the reverse order. Actually try to focus on the so-called big three and start there when you are trying to cut your expenses. And the big three are the most expensive things anyone pays for. So that's housing, that's food, and that's transport. These are usually things that take up or consume most of our budget if we want to survive, right? The reason you should start with these is that sometimes, since these things are expensive and take up a lot of our money, sometimes making one or two meaningful sacrifices here that you can live with can save you so much money that you don't even need to save on anything else, right? Because you are suddenly able to save 10% or 15% of your income as you should, and then everything is fine, right? However, we need to search for meaningful sacrifices. What is important? So yeah, let's discuss some tips. What is also important is that these are just some examples for inspiration that we could think of. Of course, everyone's situation is different. There are many other things that can be done. What we suggest doing is simply talk to your friends, maybe who seem to be able to save, and ask them how they solved it, or Google it. There are many blogs where people just describe stories of creative ways in which they managed to save a lot of money. Just try to read those. Try to get inspiration from other people. This is like a non-exhaustive list of things that you can do. So with housing, for many people, it's just choosing a smaller house or smaller flat. Especially what I'm trying to, like, the idea that I'm trying to make is that in many instances in our lives, we are just drawn to spending money because it's cool, or because everyone else does it, but we don't really think whether it's important to us and to our values, in my country, definitely people like to show off with how much money they spend, and like to show with a large. But if you buy a large house just because you want to impress others, and you don't really need it for your happiness, and you would be equally happy in a smaller house that is maybe further away from the center, then it might be worth it, considering whether you can get something smaller, because that's a way to have a lower price, and that's a way to have a lower mortgage payment, and mortgage payments are usually what takes up most of our money, right? So considering something smaller, or considering something which is further away, if it doesn't, increase your transport expenses too much, further away, from the city center, can be a good step. Some people were telling us when we were doing these webinars that, luckily their job allows them to work from home. So they don't have to live in the capital city or in the big city where their company is. And they chose to move to a smaller village or a smaller town, which is further away, and they work from home, let's say like 3 weeks a day, and 2 weeks or 3 days a week. Sorry, my English is not Englishing. 3 days a week, and let's say one of the most important days where they have some meetings, they commute, but they can stay at home and have a much less expensive house because it's in a locality that is not that expensive, right? So for people who can work from home, this can also be an option. Or for people who are young, like myself, and don't have a family yet, rather than living alone, which I personally, could afford, you can share a flat with roommates, which I currently do. I'm living with my friends, although I could afford to have more, and that's a way to cut half of your housing expenses, essentially, in many instances. So, there are things to consider. Same with food and groceries, right? One of the very basic tips is just to spend less on deliveries, on Volt, or on restaurants, and meal prep more at home. Buy ingredients for 12 euros and cook like 4 lunches that you can set aside for later for that, and split the expenses, and you will be spending probably less money than if you ate out or got food in company canteen or something like that every day. Same goes with like expensive grocery items, and trying to just replace them with something that is cheaper. You can Google budget recipes, which for which there are many YouTube tutorials or blogs. There's a lot of inspiration out there. Now the same goes with transport. Many times, for example, what people don't realize is that is sort of overlooking the decline in the price of their car. So many people buy a new car, despite the fact that in the first, there's this like thing that when you have a new car, after just a couple of years, its price will decline significantly. Prices of cars decline most significantly in their early years. So if you buy a new car and you want to sell it 4 or 5 years later, you might lose a third or a half of the purchase price, right? That also means that if you buy used cars rather than new cars, you can save a significant portion of the prices because the prices are often like 75% or 60% of the price of a new car. And that doesn't mean that the car is super unreliable, right? We're talking about the first couple of years. So you can buy a car that's been driven for 3 to 4 years and get a significant discount from the price compared to if you bought a new car, right? And that again goes back to whether you want to spend money because you want to show off or because you just want to be practical about things, right? Many people need a car, but they don't necessarily need a new car. They would be equally well off with a car that's been driven by for 4 years, right? And that can allow you to save a lot on either the purchase price or the car payment if you finance it with debt, right? So that's one way to think. Or another way to think is a thing that my dad actually told me. So we live in this village in central Slovakia, and he needs to commute to this larger city. And before thinking about this, he usually commuted individually. So he was just driving his own car. And after that, they realized that he had like 3 other friends from the same area who needed to commute to the same city. So every morning they just drive together and they always just split the gas bill. And he told me that he was able to save significant amounts of money doing that during normal months, right? Or you can bike more, use the public transport a couple days a week if this is available and well functioning. If you're in your city, we have these pink bikes in Bratislava, so we do a lot of biking. So there are options. This is a good way to start. After you examine this, just track your spending. Have that budget. Examine every week what you've spent on. Note down your expenses and try to watch your expenses and sort of examine whether you are actually spending your income on things that make you happy. Sometimes just being aware on what you spend on and, being aware of the total amount it accumulates to, such as, I don't know, how much you spend on going out in a typical month. Sometimes already that can just, give you an idea of that it's just not worth it, right? For me, definitely, when I examine some of my expenses, such as going out, I was just shocked how much money it was per month. I just didn't know that I was spending that much. And I just knew that I needed to keep this in check in future months because it's not bringing me enough happiness to be worth that much money, right? That's essentially the question you constantly want to be asking, whether this is worth the happiness that it's giving to you, or it's just out of habit, or it's just out of you maybe sort of thinking that other people will admire you or expect you to spend this money, right? Being afraid to say no to people if you're out of your budget or something like that. So that can be applied to all the other categories if done regularly, right? So these are the way to try to save and to try to get, to those 10 to 20% savings, which were suggested in one of the slides. Now, once you have this plan and can stick to it, it's not enough, right? It's not enough to create a budget. You also need to take care of your budget, right? That's the most important part of having a budget. So once a week, you should sit down, let's say on a Saturday afternoon while sipping your coffee, and track down your expenses, right? And note them into those categories and check whether you are not overspending, right? So let's say it's half of a month, it's the 15th day, and you know that you have a 300 euro budget for transport and you've already spent 200 euros, right? Then you know that you're sort of, so 200 euros, that's more than half of your budget and it's just half of the month, which means that you need to find a way to sort of tighten your belt a bit until the end of the month. Maybe use public transport a bit more or say no to some trips or something like that until the next paycheck arrives, right? In contrast, you can also reward yourself if you've not been spending, too much. So if your budget on transport is just 100 euros and it's half of the month, then you have plenty of money to spend until the end of the month. So you can reward yourself with some trip or some other thing. So this is what you should be doing every week. Have some reminders to sort of check your budget, for example, in your Google Calendar so that you get a notification or something like that. Now, once a month, you should check whether you manage to set aside 10 to 20% of your income. And you can also make some budget adjustments. So for example, if you find that you overspend in one category almost in every month, despite trying, and in some other category, you almost never use up the entire budget, you can change the target amounts in your budget, sort of find out what works for you. And then once a year, it's also important to look at the changes in your wealth. So those are all the investment accounts, savings, and things like that, and in the value of your debt to check whether your financial wealth, whether your savings are growing, and whether you are slowly repaying your debt. This is the long-term track record, because if you do that over decades, or over your productive life, then you'll get more and less financial stress and more freedom to do what you want because you have a lot of money, right? So that's the long-term goal. Now, a very important thing to say here is that I was sort of suggesting that you can do this in Excel, right? Like note down your expenses into cells in Excel and use your functions and create nice reports there, which can be fine for some people. And I have nothing against that if you're an Excel nerd and want to do that. But for most people, this is super boring and it would be a very unpleasant obligation for them to do that, right? Including me. And I work in finance and I like numbers. You know, most people don't even like math. So it's good to look for ways that make all these things easier to do, more convenient, more comfortable. And one of the best ways to do it is to try using so-called personal finance management apps, or PFM applications. These are applications that try to automate all these things. So usually you can connect them with your bank accounts. They will automatically track your expenses for you and split them into categories, right? Recognize what is transport, recognize what is restaurant, and similar things. And they also allow you to set up budgets. So I don't know, a budget for a specific category for transport, and they will be showing like a progress bar for you. So showing you what percentage of your budget for transport you've already spent and how much money you have remaining until the end of the month. There are several options in the market. In this slide, I displayed Revolut budgets. So for example, in Revolut, you are capable of setting budgets for various categories. It's relatively good with categorization. It's very good at like displaying those budgets to people. There are also applications such as Spendy or Wallet. Those two I'm mentioning because they are specifically, they work with Central European banks often. So that's what makes them good. We at Finax also have our own personal finance management app, which is called Coach. It's sort of like a function in our application. I'm not even selling anything because this is just available for free. Anyone can download it and use it. You don't need to send a cent of investment like investment savings. You don't need to be using our investment products to be able to use Coach. Essentially, it works like I described, right? So you can pair it with your bank accounts and then it will automatically categorize your expenses. You can also create budgets and have them displayed in the way you can see in the screen, right? So have a progress bar of how much money you have remaining in a specific category until the end of the month, right? It also allows you to track your wealth and debt, right? So as I said in the previous slide, it's important at least once a year to note down the changes of your savings and of your wealth and the changes in your debt, whether you manage to pay it off, to see whether your wealth is growing and whether your debt is being paid off gradually. You can just note this down in Coach. It's like a user-free environment to display it there. The goal was to sort of allow people some more objective digital advisory, because especially in our country where we first launched this, if you wanted to have this, like an analysis of your expenses and help with budget and anything like that, before the advent of apps, you usually needed to use financial advisors who were okay with these advisory, but they also needed to survive. So they needed to sell, insurance or investment products or similar things and get some intermediation fee for that. So oftentimes, if you wanted to get help with your budget, you were pushed in these insurance policies and similar things, even if sometimes they were not the cheapest options in the market, because, whoever pays intermediation fee wins. So these apps, their advantage is that you can use them without being nudged by a human to buy an insurance policy, because, it's just an app that tracks your budget. Okay. So if you want to give it a go, we'll be happy if you use Coach. But as I said, there are other options if you don't want to spend the wallet and so on. But we, of course, think that Coach is the best and most user-friendly for this. Okay, one important point before moving to the emergency fund part of this presentation. And that is, once you do this exercise and optimize your expenses, right? And pay attention to whether you're not spending too much money on things that don't really bring you happiness. It's important not to just focus on the expense side, but it's much better to use another lever that you have, right? So when you want to save more money, you can, of course, decrease your expenses, but you can also increase your incomes. And this is a very important point because, um, um, you know, we think that more people, especially in our region, should also actively focus on their income growth. It actually should be the main thing you focus on once you are sure that you are not spending money on completely useless things that don't bring you happiness. So, um, the reason we should focus on income growth is that it's often more effective than just trying to spend nothing, right? Because there is some floor for expenses. You can't spend nothing in your life. You need some expenses to enjoy life and you need some expenses to survive, right? So it's impossible to cut them down to zero, and it's also stupid to attempt to do so. But for income, hypothetically, it can grow indefinitely depending on the industry you are working in, right? And sometimes, saving 100 euros a month can be difficult because you need to change your habits, you need to change your behavior. But if you get a raise and earn 100 euros after taxes more per month because you negotiated a nice raise, you move to a more senior position or something like that, then you can start saving those 100 euros without even changing anything about your behavior. And that can be like a more convenient way to launch your savings and to get to those 10 to 20% of savings and investing, right? So you should try to actively focus on your income growth. And there are, it's not just all a matter of destiny and external forces. There are active steps that you can take to focus on your income growth, right? One of them, of course, is just getting additional, like increasing your skills and capabilities so that you can deliver more value within your work, right? So that's completing various education that allows you to learn things that allow you to move to more senior positions that are that are better paid. That can be anything from maybe some formal certifications. So, for example, I am currently completing the program, which is called Chartered Financial Analyst, or like a CFA designation, which is in our asset management investment industry one of the most recognized titles that sort of certifies that you can that you know a lot and that you can perform even more difficult tasks. In accounting, there's the ACCA designation. There are many other certifications in other areas, even in manual labor for some CNC machines or something like that, handling electricity networks and similar things, right? So there is formal certifications that you can get, but also, for many people, also smaller online courses. So currently, you can look at websites like Udemy or there's Udemy, there's Coursera, I believe is international, and similar things where you have courses and certifications for anything, for software, for digital design, for any other online tool that you might find useful in your work. Many times, maybe even your employer may be willing to reimburse that for you if it's important for your job and allows you to do it better, right? So if many of these don't cost much, it's a couple of tens of euros, and it can allow you to learn things and to handle, for example, programs or software that allows you to move to a more senior position and negotiate for a raise because now you are being much more efficient and creating more value. But it's also not just about like formal certification on formal courses, but also about the general education, right? So it's good to subscribe to podcasts and listen to podcasts or read books. This might sound like it's stupid, like how will reading a book help me get a better job? But, I know that here in Finax, we have many colleagues who sort of are currently in very senior management positions here. And one of the reasons why they could get there is that they just know a lot about how financial markets and about how personal finance, investing, education works. And they got a lot of that from reading personal finance books, from reading news about investing and about financial markets, from sometimes reading a textbook or something like that. So knowing a lot about what you do allows you to be better at anything, to ask better questions, to suggest better improvements to efficiency, to be able to sell your product better because you really understand it well, and those people you are selling to like sort of can sense it that you know what you are talking about. So even reading books, podcasts, and everything like that can help you progress over time. But then also probably even the most important thing to mention at last is to sort of like negotiate more. We are often afraid to ask for higher salary. We are afraid to negotiate because we are afraid of rejection because we are afraid that we will be bothering our bosses. But it just doesn't go without that. And again, there are good books on negotiations. There are amazing YouTube tutorials or YouTube videos, influencers who handle these topics specifically. I know the book Never Split the Difference, for example. Like, it's about negotiations. You can buy it, read it, and maybe get some tips for that. In many personal finance books, you also have like literal scripts for how you can ask for a raise. So it again comes back to education and learning these skills and being a bit annoying when it comes to asking for more money if you are actually creating more value than before, right? Okay. Yeah, it's sort of like investing in your most valuable asset, which is what you know, it's your knowledge and skills. So don't forget about this. Don't just try to not spend money. Actually, over the long run, try to enhance your career. Between times you are 25 and 35, try to move into positions with more responsibility that are more senior and will be paid better, so that you can, use up a portion of that income increase to boost your savings and save more and build more wealth, right? It's the other lever that's super efficient. Okay, now that I'm finished with like financial planning and budgeting, let's move to the last portion of today's presentation, and that is an emergency fund. For many people, emergency fund, if you don't have any savings or don't have much savings, this should be the first financial goal that you set for yourself. It should be the first thing that you save up for before even starting to invest, build wealth, and save for retirement and doing like things that require investing. And I'll explain why, right? So emergency fund, this is just some amount of money that you have set aside for unexpected situations or emergency expenses, right? Emergencies. It can help in a variety of situations. So for example, if you get sick or if you lose your job, you might be with a reduced income or with no income for a couple of months. Emergency fund allows you to sort of have some supportive income in case your reduced income is not enough to pay for everything that you need and take care of your loved ones and something like that, right? So in bad times, when you're out of job or when you're sick and can't work, maybe more long-term sick for a couple of months or even a year, this can help you. It's also about an insurance against like general accidents. So if your car breaks down and it's a more expensive repair, then you can use the emergency fund to finance this and then later refill it. Or if your washing machine breaks down or whatever, even if your phone stops working and you suddenly need a new one, emergency fund can help, right? Now, those are very intuitive things. Now we're getting to those things that most people underappreciate about having an emergency fund and having some emergency savings. A very important point is that if you have an emergency fund, this will also protect your investments. Now, if we have the second topic together about investing, you will often hear, and we also teach it in that webinar, that in order to be successful when you are investing in stocks, it's important to invest for very long periods. Because investing for short periods, like a year, 2 or 3, can be dangerous because stock values go up and down. And, if after 2 years there's some crisis and the value of your stocks declines, then you might, end up losing money. So it's important whenever an economic crisis happens in long-term investing to sort of be patient and to wait until the economy recovers and the stock markets start growing again. So you need to have a lot of time to invest so that you can wait if something like that happens. Now, what happens if you don't have an emergency fund and jump right to investing is that, if an economic crisis comes, you might find yourself out of job or something like that, and you will be forced to sell your investments because you need money to support yourself because you're out of job. The problem is that since there's an economic crisis, stock values might have also declined, right? Your portfolio might be at a loss, and you will be sort of forced to sell it, use that money, and not sort of have it invested when the economy starts to do better, starts recovering, and the stock markets start growing again. So you essentially just simulated the behavior in which you panic and sell your investments in a decline, and that's usually like an investing mistake that you will hear people doing. And you can be forced to do it, forced to withdraw during crises when stocks decline because you didn't have your emergency fund. So having your emergency fund allows you to stick to your investments over long periods, and that's one of the most important things to ensure that your investment will be successful. So it's important to start with emergency fund and build it up first, only then start investing long-term, either for retirement or just like to be rich in general. It also can help with a variety of other situations. For example, inflation. In the year 2022, when the recent crisis was, many people had to pay more for gas because it was suddenly really expensive during the winter. So many people had to pay extra money. Emergency fund is something that can help you find that money immediately, right? But emergency fund also has a positive connotation. So it can also be useful with utilizing opportunities, right? If you want to start a business and have a good offer, it might be easier to take the risk, leave your job and go start that business if you have some emergency fund that will allow you to take care of your family in case you fail, right? The same goes with being able to search for a new job, right? So if you're burnt out from your job, you don't really like it, you don't think there's a potential to grow, it's much easier to say goodbye to that job and spend a couple of months jobless just looking for better opportunities if you have an emergency fund. If you don't have it, you might be too afraid to leave your job because you just need the income every single month to take care of the people you love, right? So there's also a lot of positive situations which can be caused by emergency fund, not just protecting against the negative things. Now, that we are convinced that emergency fund is a good thing. The second question might be how much? How much should I set aside for these emergencies? This is super individual and depends, but it generally depends on, a couple of factors. In this slide, we have income type, right? So if you're more likely to lose your job because your job is less stable, then you should save up more for emergencies because like emergencies are more likely, right? So for example, state employees, layoffs there, unless you're under Elon Musk in the US, don't happen that often, right? Because states can just raise taxes and force people to pay those taxes. They don't lay off employees on a large scale that much. So state employees usually have more stable jobs and maybe don't need that much of an emergency fund. Whereas people who work in private sector companies, which during times of economic crises, when their products don't sell well, just announce layoffs and can fire people, those people should have more money. The important thing is here that usually financial advisors and in financial literature, you'll find the recommendation of saving up 3 to 6 months of your expenses, right? So just sum up what you need to spend in a typical month, and between 3 to 6 times that is an optimal emergency fund. You usually don't need more, and you shouldn't have less because that doesn't really protect you. And depending on how likely you are to lose your job, you can, for example, locate yourself in that range. So if you're a state employee and have a stable job and you're super sure that it's stable, it's maybe fine if you just save up 3 or 4 months of expenses. If you have a job that is more endangered by layoffs, it's better to save up maybe 5 to 6, right? A little bit more. If you're self-employed or own a business or something like that, you should have definitely 6. Like that's super dangerous. But it also depends on other things. So for example, it depends on the amount of people who depend on your income. So if you have kids, then it's definitely better to have a larger emergency fund for like 5 to 6 months of expenses. If you don't have kids and don't have anyone who depends on you, then it's perfectly fine if you have 3 or 4, right? Same goes with how much debt you have. So if you have a mortgage and need to pay it every month, or if you have debt and need to pay it every month, then it's better to have a larger emergency fund to ensure that you are able to repay that even in bad times. Whereas if you don't have any debt, if you don't have kids, then it's perfectly fine to have a smaller emergency fund. But a very important thing is to have between 3 to 6 months of your expenses. That's like a thing to note down. Okay, once you have between 3 to 6 months of expenses, then you might be asking the very last logical question, and that is where to keep it, right? I have this money. Should I just put it in my bank account or something like that? Let's discuss that a bit. In our view, optimal emergency fund should have 3 traits, right? 3 characteristics. The first of them is that it should be liquid. That sounds like a scary word, but it just means that it's accessible. You should be able to access that money and use it to pay for your emergency situations rather quickly, right? You should also not be taking a lot of risk. So this is not the money for you to gamble with. This is not the money to make you rich. This is money to protect you. So you shouldn't be investing it into highly risky investments, such as cryptocurrencies, such as stocks, such as other similar things, right? This is to protect you. This is not there to be your gambling property. But it's also good to keep it somewhere where it at least can keep pace with inflation, right? Where it at least can beat the pace of rising prices. This is because if you just keep it somewhere with zero interest and do not beat inflation with this money, it won't protect you that much in 10 or 15 years time, right? Because prices will rise and maybe something that was capable of paying 4 months of your expenses 10 years ago now barely covers 3 months of expenses now, and it just doesn't protect you that well because car repairs and smartphones and everything like that, groceries, if you get laid off from your job, all of that got more expensive, and you need now a larger emergency fund for that. So to prevent that, to prevent your degree of protection from declining, you can at least find for ways to earn some small interest on it to beat inflation, right? And we even think that it's worth to have some, undergo some low risk to beat that inflation. Risk just means that the value of the emergency fund will be fluctuating a bit. It won't be very stable. It will sometimes decline, sometimes rise, not too much, but just slightly, because that's often the price that you need to pay for beating inflation. Now, how to do that? Thank God, compared to a couple of years ago where interest rates were negative in the euro area, and it was impossible to earn any interest on our money. Thank God, interest rates are now higher, right? So, for example, the deposit rate of the European Central Bank is currently at 2.5%. This means that many options emerged which pay interest despite having virtually no risk, right? So, for example, you can search whether there are high interest savings accounts in your country. These are usually offered by smaller banks like online banks, or maybe some banks that do not, that aren't big banks, because those usually can afford to pay very little interest. But you can search whether there are not some good high interest savings account. There should be at least some in some online banks or in some other companies accessible, which pay like 2.5% interest. And that's good because that at least can help you cover a portion of inflation, right? Similarly, there are so-called money market investments, either in the form of money market mutual funds or money market ETFs. These are all investment instruments that we talk more about in the investing portion. There's not enough time to explain it here, but the bottom line is that those are investment products that have slight, risk, have some fluctuations, some declines, some increases, but they usually copy the interest rates that the central bank sets, right? So they usually, if you hold them for like a year or two, earn somewhere around 2.5% currently, because that's sort of, they contain instruments that attempt to copy this interest rate. So they're called like money market mutual funds or money market ETFs, money market investments. So those can be also good destinations for a portion of the emergency fund. In general, coming back to this slide, what we usually recommend is when you have those 3 to 6 months of expenses, split it into two parts. You can put 1,000 euros in your savings account, even if it pays no interest, just somewhere where you can access it immediately. That's for super dangerous situations, such as, I don't know, you're somewhere at the airport and you need to buy a new ticket because your flight got canceled or your flight ticket got canceled for some reason or something like that. So, keep 1,000 in your savings account, even if it pays no interest. And for the rest of the emergency fund, you can search for like a very low risk investment solution, such as those money market funds, or maybe even a mixed portfolio that is mostly in bonds and partially in stocks. Bonds are usually safer than stocks, so they have lower risk, right? So even those mixed portfolios can be okay for a long-term emergency fund, so that you can beat inflation with it. We have more about that, in our blogs, for example, if you want to read about that. Okay, that's essentially all that I've prepared for today. Let me conclude with this table, because some people might be slightly disappointed. Like, you came here to learn about finance and investing, and this was and expected to hear a lot of sophisticated and complicated mathematical information about how to invest in stocks and become rich. And instead of that, we were talking about saving and increasing your income and stuff like that, and doing that over the long run. So why did we start with saving? A very important thing to conclude this sort of presentation with is that many times saving is more important than earning a lot of money via investments, right? And that's very underappreciated. Most people focus on earning higher profits when investing, right? They want to search for the stocks that will rise the most, and similar things, right? This is super risky. Most of them fail. But also, it's not a good starting point because many times it's actually more important to start by having a sufficient savings rate. And you can see that in your table. So what this table shows is as you go from the left to right, so in the columns, it's your savings rate, how much you can save with an annual income of 15,000 euros. That's not much, right? Like that's definitely not a super high income person. It's like a manageable income in many of our countries. And you can see how much of that income the person is able to save and invest in the second row, right? So those 300 euros, 750 euros, 1,500 euros, that is the amount of money that you save and invest over the entire year. So this is not monthly. You have to divide that by 12 to get to the monthly investment. So you have to agree that this is not like a super unimaginable amount to save and set aside if you try a bit. Yes, it might not be easy at first, but regular people can get to this amount set aside monthly, right? Monthly, not yearly, right? 1,500 in an entire year or something like that. And as you go, so that's the columns. And as you go from top to bottom, so the rows, that is the percentage profit or percentage return that you on average per year earn on your investments. So as you go down, you become a better investor. You pick better stocks or whatever. And as you go on to the right, you become a better saver. You set aside a higher portion of your income. Now start in the top left corner where there's 9,000 euros. Yeah, and the numbers in the table, they are the final value of wealth that you manage to build up, right? So that's the amount that you will have after 30 years of investing. So essentially investing throughout most of your productive life by the time when you are about to retire. That is the total wealth that you manage to build up, right? So start in the bottom, in the top left corner, you have 9,000 result there, right? Pretty bad after 30 years. If you go down, so you become a very good investor and earn 10%, it increases to 54,000 euros, right? That's pretty good. But compare that with staying a bad investor and having 0% and just going from left to the right, right? So from 2% savings rate to 20% savings rate. You will get to 90,000 euros. So that's almost twice as much as if you become a much, much better investor. So this shows that in many situations, increasing your savings rate can be actually more powerful in terms of your final wealth than becoming a better investor, right? You can be the best investor in the world, but if you deposit 200 euros per year into your investment account, you won't ever get filthy rich. You won't have financial freedom. You won't have very high wealth. For that, you first need to be able to set aside a big portion of your income, and then you can start thinking about how to increase the profits on your investments and how to invest wisely. But the first step is to have savings because it's often the more efficient thing, and it matters more. So that's the order you should take. Okay, here on this slide, we have some recommended literature. We also publish a lot of additional material on our blog or have podcasts in several languages. So you can check those out. They are freely accessible on our YouTube channel or on just podcast channel, podcasts platforms like Spotify. All these books are amazing books that sort of expand on the ideas that I was just able to briefly introduce most of the ideas in this webinar. These books go much more deeply into these topics and illustrate them based on more numbers, but also more stories that worked for people who created these books. So you can take a screenshot or take a photo, and if you want, you can order some of these books. They are very good starting points. Okay, that's essentially all that I have prepared here. Thank you very much for your attention. Now, 2 points now. First of all, in front of you, you can see a QR code. It's just our feedback form. So if you scan it and if you go to that website, it will ask you a couple of questions. Just please bear in mind that if you open this, you will have to switch the language in the top right corner. So in the top right corner, there will be the option to switch from Slovak to English because the basic language for this form is Slovak, right? So if you could please fill it in, we would be very happy, but just switch it to English before. Now, we're not finished yet because we have 10 minutes, and I can see that there are questions on Slido, so I will go through them. I just wanted to give you this QR code so that you can, slowly fill in the form while I am answering the questions that you have posted. Thank you very much for posting them. Okay. Yep. Good. Give me a second to get some water, and let's get to your questions. So the first question I see in Slido is, if I want to move my investments to another broker, can I transfer my ETFs or do I have to sell them first? I'm not sure how this works with all brokers. You can definitely do that with us. So we also function as a broker, and we do transfers of securities, right? So that is where just you don't sell securities and make a deposit with another investment provider, but you just transfer your securities, sort of their ownership or their custody, into another broker. That is definitely possible. Sometimes there are extra fees associated with this, so it's good to check the price list of the specific broker. In the price list, there should be a row for how much transfers of securities such as ETFs or stocks sort of costs. Sometimes it can be more. Or there needs to be some minimum volume to make it free of charge. So check that price list or call your broker. But it should be broadly possible. Like definitely stock exchanges and custodians allow this. We as a broker allow this, but it's probably at the discretion of each broker. So it's best to call yours and ask about the price and ask whether this is possible. But for example, with us, this would be possible. Okay, can see. Do you allow customers to pick their own ETFs? We don't. So we are a robo-advisory platform. This means that we sort of offer some preset portfolios that are just, it would be easier to understand if we were talking about the other about the second topic of investing, because many of the terms I will be using are explained more deeply there. But we sort of just have globally diversified stock portfolios, also some bond portfolios for safer goals. And our job is to sort of find out the characteristics of the client. So how they want to invest, what's their relationship to risk, how long they can invest for, what is their financial goal, what is their income, and similar things. And based on that, recommend a portfolio which has an appropriate risk for their situation, an appropriate risk for their goals, so that they don't risk too much, but also earn enough to reach their financial goals, right? So this is not a platform where people who want to invest into specific stocks, for example, go. It's more about having a portfolio that is reasonable and sort of calming people from their emotions and from everything to stick to their reasonable investment strategy for a long enough period. With us specifically, we have an elite segment. That's clients who hold more than 100,000 euros here. Those people can unlock features such as brokerage, where they can just tell us which stocks they want to get traded, and we will execute those orders on stock exchanges. Or they can also select their own ETFs into portfolios, but this is only available to the elite segment, right? So for most people, we have reasonable portfolios with risk that is specifically tailor-made to their investment profile, and they get that portfolio recommended. It's essentially we exist to allow people who don't understand investing enough to sort of compose their own portfolios and select their own ETFs from thousands of options to also invest, right? Because we do it for them. We do the research and we do the portfolio creation for them and just recommend. Okay, since Finax is based in Slovakia, if I have a legal dispute, do I have to file a complaint in Slovakia? I don't think that's necessary. To be fair, it's probably the easiest option. So if you ever have a broker or an investment provider, it's important to check whether they are a licensed and regulated subject, right? So that's one of the first things to check if you want to recognize a financial scam, for example, right? So to check whether the company you want to invest with has a license from the national securities regulator. So in Slovakia, and that's usually differs based on country. In Slovakia, the National Bank of Slovakia, our central bank, does the supervision of investment providers, and they also give out these licenses to companies that are like secure and have a license from them and have to apply with them. So since it's a central bank, like National Bank of Slovakia, it's perfectly fine with communicating in English and everything, and you can contact them and reach them in English. So since that's our direct regulator, probably just contacting them in English if you have a dispute is the easiest and quickest option, because they have the authority to impose fines on us and regulate us and order us to do some things very directly. So that can be the most convenient option. But I think that even like the financial market regulators or European bodies in your own countries should be able to communicate across countries and sort of settle your dispute in another country if you have it. But so you can also contact like your local financial market regulator, your local regulator of investment companies. But I think this would be, for example, longer and less convenient than if you just in English contacted, the direct regulator, the National Bank of Slovakia directly. Yeah, not sure about the specifics of the process. I've never done that as a client, but yeah, this should be the two options. For investment in Slovakia, I can see a lot of questions about investing in Finax. I wasn't even like mentioning any investing in Finax, but okay. In Finax, how fast can I withdraw my money? Do you have any withdrawal delays? Yes, we do. So currently, trading in stock exchanges for Finax investments happens once a week on Tuesdays. These are so-called trading days. This is because we currently function on like an older outsourced trading system that is sort of difficult to handle. So in order to keep our costs reasonable, even for clients, we trade once a week. So usually when you put a withdrawal order with us, you have to put it by Monday 12, right? 12 a.m., so Monday noon. And on the next Tuesday, your portfolio will get sold. So if you, for example, put the withdrawal order on Friday, you have to wait until Tuesday for stocks to get, or ETFs to get sold. It then arrives into our company account, and we then sell it to, send it to client accounts. So yeah, there are delays depending on how far from Tuesday you are. We are currently developing, our IT team is developing our own investment platform that we need to code that would allow us to trade more frequently, but we still need to wait for it to be developed, right? So of course, we are working on having like more frequent trading and essentially immediate withdrawals eventually. But there's not like a specific date for when this will be launched. We just know it should be some point at the end of this year. ETFs are already diversified. How does Finax improve them, and what extra value do you provide? This is a good question. Like many investors are asking this. Because there's the legitimate criticism of, if I understand investing, I can just pick my own ETFs and I can buy them at some trading platform, sort of always in each given month, send some money there and split it percentage-wise across the ETFs to have like an optimal portfolio. And I don't need Finax to pick my portfolio for me and to manage my portfolio for me, because I can sort of do it at a cheaper cost elsewhere. So this is a legitimate criticism. However, it's important to realize that there are, and especially for people who don't understand investing that much, that there are several super important added values, right? So first of all, it's just with the selection of the portfolio, right? Many people don't understand it. There are thousands of ETFs which have different options. They have different distribution of dividend payments or of interest payments. They have different index replication methods. They have different things. Some of them can have even different tax implications. So for regular people who don't understand finance, picking from these thousands of options a portfolio that is reasonably well set, especially if they are sort of looking for not just a pure investment in stocks, but maybe are investing for a shorter period and need to mix stocks and bonds. So you also have to decide what percentage of the portfolio to put in stocks and what in bonds. It's essentially impossible for them to do the calculations and select the portfolio, and they would rather not invest because they are too afraid or it requires too much of their time, right? So for these people, the portfolio selection and recommendation process becomes much easier if you have robo-advisors like Finax that allow them to just like fill in one simple questionnaire in 10 minutes and get a portfolio that is suitable for them, even if they don't understand. So this is added value number one. Added value number two is just convenience. And this is even for many, many of our clients who are professionals and who used to trade themselves or invest in ETFs themselves for a long time. And that is the fact that if you have someone who just automates the entire process and you can just set up a standing order to send money into ETFs once a month, it removes a lot of time burden from you, right? So when you are doing it yourself on some platforms, you sort of have to send the deposit and then manually split split the deposit across different ETFs, right? Also, there's a process called rebalancing, which I don't know if I'm capable of explaining simply in words. It's sort of if you want to have, let's say, 60% of your portfolio in US stocks and 40% in European stocks, and US stocks rise and European stocks decline, then you can deviate from that allocation, right? You suddenly can have like 80% in US and 20% in Europe, which is suboptimal because you want different percentages. So then you need to sell a portion of your US stocks and buy sell a portion of US stocks and buy some Europe to sort of put it back into 60-40 percentage split, right? This is a process called rebalancing. It's very important to maintain the optimal portfolio composition. It's a very natural process of every investment. And even like in finance classes, you get taught how to do that. And if you have to do that manually, so you manually decide how much to buy, how much to sell, potentially with creating tax obligations with that, it's just very time consuming and people don't like to do it, right? So with having someone to manage your investments, you can get rid of doing a lot of math and a lot of manual clicking yourself. And for people who do not want to spend a lot of time obsessing over their money because it's just boring and they don't like thinking about money, and they want to spend most of their free time either doing what they love, like hobbies or being with their family, or focusing on their career so that they can earn more money, they're perfectly fine with using a robo-advisor to deprive them of this time that they would need to manage the investment, right? And the third obvious added value is education, and that shouldn't be underestimated. So, for example, what we do is we produce a lot of podcasts, we send emails, we write articles that you get through push notifications, which sort of inform you. For example, when there's a market decline, they provide you information on what is happening, calm you down so that you don't panic, explain what the situation is and what you should do as an investor to sort of not make investment mistakes. And it's also very important for common people because selecting a portfolio is the first step, but then handling it in a way that is wise and not panicking, for example, in the process, because you get and not panicking, for example, is even more important than having a good portfolio, right? And robo-advisors like Finax can offer you with this real-time coaching and mentoring during the investment process, which again might not be super important for someone who is a professional already, but for regular people who don't have much financial education, this is a very important added value and very important aspect. Okay. Last question. Would you consider S&P 500 as a good investment for emergency fund? Not lately, of course. No, I definitely wouldn't consider S&P 500 as a good investment for emergency fund. S&P 500 is a stock investment. So this is just, if you buy S&P 500, you buy, if I simplify it, 500 largest stocks of companies headquartered in the US, and stocks are a risky investment, right? So the value of stocks goes up and down significantly, and the declines can be pretty significant. So it's pretty common for the S&P 500 to decline by 20%, for example. That happens on average every 4 to 5 years, right? And even deeper declines are possible. In history, we've seen 45% of the value being erased, right? So stocks are risky, and you don't want to risk too much with your emergency fund, because emergency fund is there to protect you. And if there's an economic crisis and the value of stocks declines, No worries. Thank you very much for staying here for so long. I know we're running a bit over time. I just wanted to address the questions, right? So with your emergency fund, you don't want to risk too much because the time when you'll need your emergency fund the most is an economic crisis, right? That's where you are most likely to, for example, lose your job and need the money in your emergency fund. But during economic crisis, things like S&P 500 can decline significantly. Let's say by 20, 30%, right? So that means that a quarter or a third of your emergency fund isn't there when you need it because you lost your job, right? So you shouldn't definitely invest your emergency fund only in stocks. I think reasonable investments would be anything from those high interest savings accounts or money market mutual funds or money market ETFs, so called. You can note this term. It's like a specific investment term. It's a type of funds. So either those or mixed portfolios, which are mixed from bonds and stocks, right? So those can contain a small portion of S&P 500, let's say like, mixed can mean like 40% of that is stocks and 60% is bonds. But around half or even a majority of that portfolio should be bonds, which are safer than stocks, right? Their value goes up and down less, especially if you invest into government bonds or government bonds of developed countries then don't have too long times to maturity. All of that is being discussed in our second webinar. So if you want to have more information on that, you can always ask me to come and I'll be happy to present that webinar to you as well. Okay, that's all about questions. Thank you very much for your very good insights. Let me just check. Yeah. Okay. So I think that addressed your questions. Sorry for running a bit over time. Thank you very much for staying here for so long. And I'll be maybe looking forward to seeing you in the future. I hope that you got some inspiration, got some answers, and got some like guideline on what you can do. Thank you very much and have a lovely day. There up. Oh yeah. Is that a raised hand? Did you want to say anything?
No, sorry. I just wanted to thank you, not to clap, not to raise questions.
Okay, thank you.
In the end.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, perfect. We'll send the recording to you later on. Thank you.
Take care.
Have a nice
Bye.
day. Bye-bye.